Hallo, guten Abend. Herzlich willkommen im MAK zu unserer zweiten zweiten Panel in der Gesprächsreihe Sehnsucht Arbeit, Longing for Labor, die wir zusammen mit der Arbeiterkammer Wien konzipiert haben und in Kooperation durchführen im Rahmen dieser Vienna Biennale 2017. Und ich bedanke mich sehr herzlich auch bei Roman Berker von der Arbeiterkammer, der heute hier ist, für diese Zusammenarbeit und möchte Ihnen ganz kurz unser Panel vorstellen. Und wir werden nur zur Information die Diskussion auf Englisch halten, da zwei Panelists englischsprachig sind. Wenn Sie aber Fragen haben, auch gerne dazwischen, können wir das gerne auch übersetzen und auf Deutsch auch weitere Erläuterungen geben. So, hello, good evening, dear panelists. Thank you very much for joining us tonight at the MAK. And as we discussed, I will do a short intro of each one of you so that people know whose face is which name. And I would then ask you to introduce yourselves and your practice and fields of research by a short 5-minute intro. Some will play videos and show images to that. And after we will enter the discussion on the optimization of a woman or the human. So I will start with the person next to me, Tim Cole, author and internet publicist from the US, but living in Germany and Austria since the 60s, an early adopter of the internet and the practice of internet publishing and blogging. Diane Bauer, an artist and writer based in London and a member of a working group called Laboria Cubonics that we will hear a lot about later. And the artist, Jean Raspail, whose work is currently on view in the exhibition Artificial Tears as part of Vienna Biennale that is today open till 10 p.m. in the exhibition hall, so you can take a look as well. And he recently founded his own company titled Non-Food, which we will also hear a little bit about. And we have Janina Loh, postdoc at the University of Philosophy at the Department of Philosophy of Media and Technology, also working closely with Mark Höckelberg, who was a member of our Vienna Biennale circle, with who we closely related and met throughout the preparation of the Vienna Biennale this year. Her field of research is specialized in critical post-humanism and anthropology, and she's also specialized on post-human elements in Hannah Arendt's writings, which I love to hear. And last but not least, we have Dr. Peter Hoffmann from Arbeiterkammer Wien, from the Chamber of Labor Vienna, who is a psychologist for work and organization and specialized in the social policies department of the Arbeiterkammer. So I would now ask you to start with your intro statements, and maybe also we just proceed not alphabetically but chronologically.
Okay, if you want. Also erstmal Servus, ich komme aus dem Lungau und wenn ihr mir Fragen auf Deutsch stellt, dann beantworte ich die direkt. But of course I have been asked to speak English for the rest of the talk, so I will. I am really what Germans sometimes call the altes Urgestein of the internet. I have been working as an internet journalist since the early 90s. I started my first blog in 95, which makes me the oldest blogger in the German language. My business model is write a book and talk about it. I write books for managers about the internet, about digital transformation, about where we are heading. And since managers don't have time to read the books, they will ask me to come up on stage and describe in an hour or so what is in the book, so they don't have to read it. My latest book is Digitale Transformation. The one before that was actually, I thought, more interesting. It was digital enlightenment, digitale Aufklärung, which I wrote together with Ossi Urks. Maybe one or two of you have heard of Ossi. He was the internet guru, the original internet guru. He had the same red dreadlocks that Jaron Lanier runs around in. And he was a wonderful person to work with. He was a philosopher steeped in the Frankfurter Schule as well as in the Indian philosophical tradition, and the result of that book was very fascinating. I have recently collaborated with Gerd Leonhardt, who bills himself as the futurist in Zurich, and he just wrote a book entitled Technology versus Humanity. He wrote it in English, although he is German, And I translated it into German, although I'm an American. Very interesting form of working together. Gert and I do not totally agree. Gert is the product, actually he studied theology first before he became a futurist. He's a Protestant, Protestant work ethics and things like that. He takes a rather high-brow view of the things that are facing us today and the dangers and challenges. I'm more pragmatical. I think we should lean back and enjoy it more and not worry so much. That's kind of a German thing, you know. Germans gave us, Americans and English-speaking people, the word angst. And that is a very determining factor of discussions in Germany about technology and the future. Many more people than where we come from have angst about it. But let's see how the discussion goes.
Okay, my name is Diane Bauer. I am an artist and part of a working group called Laboria Cubonics. I'm not going to say that much about it because I have a video that I think kind of covers it. But briefly, we wrote a text together, 6 of us spread across 5 different countries. The text is called Xenofeminism, A Politics for Alienation, and it avows alienation as a productive force and avows abstraction, complexity, and is working to develop a feminism that takes these things seriously as forces for change rather than something to fight against. So I will leave it at that for all I'm going to say for now and just play the video because it's about 5 minutes. So I don't know if I can... So I'm not going to say that much more right now, but I'm happy to answer questions about xenofeminism or what we mean by alienation in the questions. But I'll leave it for that for the moment.
Hi, I'm Sean Raspit, and I have some images to show. Oh, I think I have to press the button first. Let's see if that's right. Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, never mind. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I'm an artist, and in my artwork, I've been primarily working with liquids for the last several years. Part of the reason for that is to work with what I see as the kind of paradigm of the contemporary mode of production, the kind of mass economy, rather than the paradigm of like the art economy, where things are made as a singular object or a singular experience even. So this is a reconstitution of crude oil. So it's basically a chemical reconstruction of what crude oil is when it comes out of the ground. And, of course, crude oil is very obviously central to the present day kind of chemical and material mode of production. I think that will change, and I hope it will change. But for now, this is kind of this is the juice that everything runs on. This is the kind of fundamental substance that a lot of things are made out of, and what energy is produced with. Oh, and this is the work from the exhibition here. These are 16 artificial flavor chemicals, and it kind of forms a almost like a palette, almost like a color palette of artificial flavors. So you can see that there's a certain kind of pattern happening with the names of those molecules. And basically, they're getting with each box to the right, there's another carbon atom added on one side of the molecule, and then as you move down on the grid, there's a carbon atom added on the other side of the molecule. So it's this kind of structural arrangement of molecules, which also forms another kind of aspect of the contemporary mode of production in terms of artificial flavors, and what I see as a kind of aesthetic layer that's built into functional products like food, soft drinks, and also there's flavors and fragrances in cosmetics and cleaning solutions and all these kinds of things that we use every day. Okay, and then this is another kind of larger scale. This is closer to how these chemicals would be stored in a factory setting and how they would be circulated in these kind of large, what they call IBC tanks. So each one of those has 100 liters. In this case, the molecule is methylanthranilate, which, at least in the United States, is often used as an artificial grape flavor. And it's also found in jasmine and other flowers as well. Okay, so, and then more recently, I've gone from kind of exhibiting these artificial flavors in art contexts, or these chemicals in art contexts, to actually making products. On the left is a prototype that I made that's a 90% algae paste that you can eat. And this is something I made when I worked for a company called Soylent in Los Angeles. In the middle is a flavor that I had designed for Soylent. So I worked for that company for about a year and a half. And that's kind of what got me into algae as a food source, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. And then on the right is another kind of experimental prototype that I made for the company. So this is just some statistics about present-day food production. So it contributes about an estimated 19 to 29% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is generally, I think, larger than transportation. It's more of 40% of the Earth's land is used for agriculture, 70% of fresh water is used for agriculture and food production. And the more urgent thing is that food production would need to increase by about 60% by 2050 to accommodate the world's population. So all of those resources that are being used up are going to be, plus 60% within 30 years or so. And then, so this shows kind of what we use at the current level at the top, and then below is the the projected 2050 levels. And as you can see, we're actually beyond 100% of the water that we use now. So we're at a point where we begin to run out of water, or we're actually well past that point within about 30 years or so, based on current usage levels. And you can see that greenhouse gas emissions increase, land usage increases to 64% of the Earth's of usable land, and so that's the kind of dire prediction that we're set up for at the moment. This is why algae to me has been seems like a very interesting and very important new crop, and it's pretty unfamiliar to most people. It's relatively new as a food source, although some civilizations have used it for millennia even. But there's new technology in terms of what they call closed bioreactor systems and LED lights and other kinds of ways of optimizing the growth of algae. And the reason that algae is so beneficial is that it's very efficient. It grows incredibly fast. It's photosynthetic. And as you can see, it's about, according to this, a closed bioreactor system, which is on the right, is about 100 times as efficient as like soy in terms of producing usable food from a specific amount of land and a specific amount of water. This graph also shows how much carbon the algae kind of takes out of the atmosphere to build its own cellular infrastructure, which we then would consume. So this gives you kind of an idea. The scale is logarithmic, so where soybeans is roughly a little bit below 10, and then the closed bioreactor system is about 900 in terms of CO2 sequestration, and similar difference in terms of productivity of the crop per unit of land. Let's see. Oops. And so just as a way of kind of giving an overview, I see the kind of the problem of feeding the entire human population. It's a problem of what I would call biomass. So it's a problem of like living matter, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, all those things that are produced by primary producers, so like photosynthetic organisms. They have to travel from these primary producers that are synthesizing these things from sunlight to us. And the fewer steps that you put in between, the more efficient it is. So if you look at, this is the kind of overview on the left, and then if you look at the right, you can see, what this is showing is the amount of biomass that you would get from 1 unit of sunlight, relative to the other crops, relative to the other food sources. So you can see microalgae can produce much more biomass compared with things like corn and soy. And then when you get to livestock, that's an increasingly small amount of biomass that you're producing. It's pretty much the least efficient way of producing food, because not only are you're growing all this immense amounts of crops, but then you're feeding it to another organism. Each time you go up one level in the food chain, you lose about 90% of the biomass. So it makes it very, very inefficient as a way of supporting a human population as a food source. Oops. Okay, and then I'll go through just real quick. Not sure if I have much more time, but okay. So I'll go through pretty quickly. This is just a kind of idea for for non-food, which is a company that I co-founded recently. Our goal is to produce foods that are made as much as possible from algae, and this is our kind of like very long-term roadmap. This is like if everything goes really well, and we're able to make a successful consumer packaged good company that produces algae-based products that people eat, and we are able to do that successfully, then these are kind of the next steps. And I think what's really interesting is that eventually you could have your own kind of algae bioreactor at home, but the issue that is probably the primary issue that keeps that from being a thing is that the flavor of algae, people are not used to it. So I think there's some other steps of like optimization that have to happen, including genetic engineering, which with CRISPR-Cas9 you can actually shut off some of the metabolic pathways that produce these off flavors, so you can actually get an algae that tastes much more neutral. So once you do that, you could have something about the size of this table. It's about the size of like a mini fridge, and it would produce all the food that you need for the course of a day. And once we make that food taste good, then problem solved. That's the biggest problem, I think. All right, we'll go for that flavor. That's the next flavor. And this just shows you a little bit about the infrastructure. So we get our algae from another supplier. This is some photos of their factory. I think it's just very interesting to look at. And this is all part of a kind of bioreactor system where the algae is being fed through pipes. It's being illuminated with LED lights when it's inside, and then it goes outside to get sunlight. And these are some past projects that I've done with Soylent. I think it's as much a cultural thing.
I will have to
okay.
pass
So then,
on to the next panel.
Cool. All right, that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you, actually. Hello and good evening, everybody. Einen wunderschönen guten Abend an Sie alle. Sie können mir gerne auch Fragen auf Deutsch stellen oder mich auf Deutsch unterbrechen. I'm happy to skip between the languages. At least I will do my best. My name is Janina Loh. I'm postdoc or university assistant, if you prefer that term, at the University of Vienna. I'm working at the chair for philosophy of technology and media together with, as you already said, Professor Mark Kuckelberg. And there I am specialized within this philosophical subdiscipline of philosophy of technology within several fields of research. I'm going to talk about to you in the next several minutes. I'm currently working on 2 book projects and, of course, officially my habilitation project that is at least officially the most important one. Yeah, but there are actually 4 research areas I'm very interested in. First and foremost, the research area of trans and posthumanism, trans and posthumanismus. I'm currently writing a book, an introduction to trans and posthumanism that will be published in spring 2018 at Unius. Unius is, at least in German-speaking countries for philosophers and students of philosophy, a very famous publisher that publishes a series of introductions to philosophical topics and philosophers. And currently I think there are about 150 to 180 introductions, and I am in the luxury position to write another introduction on, as I just said, trans and posthumanism. I think about myself as a critical posthumanist in the tradition of Donna Haraway and Rosie Braidotti and others. And that means that I understand my work as anti-transhumanist, and I'm deeply critical, if not anti, to the classical Western humanism tradition as well. But we might talk about that later in the discussion. Okay, and the second research area is robot ethics. Throughout the last 2 to 3 years, I gave a lot of talks, especially in schools, on what is robot ethics and what ethical and philosophical questions are raised regarding working together with artificial systems and man-machine interaction and so on. And can we think about robots as actually artificial moral agents or not? And in what ways can we think that robots are equipped with several competences and abilities, to call them maybe electronic persons, as the European Union starts to do now. Actually, they have a project on calling artificial systems electronic persons, I think. So that is the first the second research area, and actually I will write another book next year, an introduction again to robot ethics. It is not clear what publisher will get it, because I'm very excited that 2 publishers are interested in that book, and I will not talk about that anymore tonight. But yeah, I will write this second book throughout the next year on robot ethics. And then there's a third research area on Hannah Arendt. Actually, Hannah Arendt is for me one of the most important, or maybe the most important philosopher. I started working or researching on her during my study of philosophy back in Berlin a long time ago, and Hannah Arendt is very important for my PhD thesis as well. And she is, again, very important for my habilitation project. This habilitation project is, and that is a working title, on the critical posthumanist elements in Hannah Arendt's thinking and work. Yeah, we can talk about that later again. And there's a fourth research area on responsibility, actually, because responsibility was the main topic of my PhD thesis. I worked on the traditional or conventional concept of responsibility, the traditional understanding of responsibility, and afterwards, after I got interested in the field of philosophy of technology, I started working on ascribing responsibility in man-machine interaction, and there are several workshops I'm doing right now with teachers and with students and scholars on the question how to behave responsibly towards new technologies, for example, social media, big data, etc. And a side project is that I think about transforming, one could say, transforming our traditional understanding of responsibility in the age of automation with questions such as, do we need a new understanding of responsibility in order to ascribe it maybe to artificial systems as well, or in the global financial market system, etc. Yeah, that's it.
Peter?
So, I will talk in German, if this is right. Zuerst einmal congratulations to the exhibition. It is very interesting and diskutabel. Zu meiner Person, ich selbst bin Arbeits- und Organisationspsychologe und habe 28 Jahre in der Arbeiterkammer gearbeitet, und zwar mit dem Ziel, sozusagen Unternehmen, Betriebsräte, Mitarbeiterinnen zu unterstützen, ihre Arbeit menschengerecht zu gestalten. Also menschengerecht, darunter verstehen wir, dass Arbeit soll lernförderlich sein, sie soll persönlichkeitsförderlich sein, gesundheitsförderlich sein, aber auch sie soll durchführbar sein. Was in den kommenden Jahren, oft wenn man sich die Entwicklungen ansieht, oft eine schwierige Frage ist für die Arbeitnehmerinnen, aber auch für die Konstrukteure. Es werden Maschinen produziert, es werden Computer, es werden Roboter produziert, wo man aber auch dann die Leute befähigen muss, dass sie diese bedienen können. Und das ist ein wichtiger Punkt, hier rechtzeitig darauf zu achten und zu drängen in der Konstruktion, dass hier, sage ich, Soziologen, Psychologen, Human Factor Spezialisten mit den Technikern, mit IT-Leuten zusammenarbeiten und schon im Vorhinein drauf schauen, ist das überhaupt machbar, was sie entwickeln. Das Spannende an der Geschichte ist, es gibt seit 30 Jahren Normen dafür und Richtlinien, wie ist menschengerechte Arbeit zu gestalten. Es gibt zum Beispiel Normen, die sind fast wie Checklisten, wenn man Systeme einführt, was ist darauf zu beachten, was ist dabei zu beachten. Niemand kennt diese Normen und niemand kümmert sich um diese Normen, was sehr interessant ist, obwohl die Betriebe ja oft darauf drängen, dass ihre Produkte immer ISO genormt sind und bestimmte Standards erfüllen und so weiter. Also wir brauchen auch mehr Bewusstsein, zum Beispiel wenn wir über Roboter, neue Technologien reden, dass es auch Normen und Richtlinien für menschengerechte Arbeitsgestaltung gibt. Das sollten wir in Zukunft mehr beachten. Was wir sonst machen, ist natürlich dann in die Richtung, dass wir Studien durchführen. Darum geht es in diesen Studien, dass wir schauen, stimmen die Ressourcen, sozusagen die organisatorischen Ressourcen, die technischen Ressourcen, die man den Leuten zur Verfügung stellt, damit sie ihre Ziele, die man ihnen setzt, erreichen können. Und das ist ein ganz wichtiger Punkt. Wir gehen in die Arbeit, ja, dass wir Ziele erreichen, weil nur dann bekommen wir Geld. dass diese Ziele auch erreichbar sind. Also wir geben dann durch diese Analysen Feedback, was ist zu verbessern, sowohl bei den Skills von den Mitarbeitern wie auch in der Organisation. Und da komme ich jetzt zu dem Punkt, das heißt der Optimierung. Wir reden aber nicht von Optimierung, sondern von Verbesserung, von Improvement. Denn was bedeutet Optimierung des Menschen? Die Optimierung des Menschen bedeutet, wenn wir es genauer sehen wollen, Optimierung von psychischen und körperlichen Skills. Da können wir dann nachher noch reden. Aber eigentlich ist es viel wichtiger, dass wir gemeinsam mit den Leuten es ermöglichen und sie dazu befähigen, dass sie sozusagen selbst die Entwicklung in die Hand nehmen, selbst die Verbesserung, die sie brauchen, in die Hand nehmen. Und da ist natürlich für uns das Thema Industrie 4, Digitalisierung, Roboterisierung ein sehr, sage ich, sehr spannendes, aber auch ein sehr heikles und kontroverses Thema für uns, wo natürlich als Arbeitnehmervertretung wir schon darauf schauen, dass die Menschen an erster Stelle stehen und nicht die Maschinen und dann der optimale Profit, wenn ich das jetzt da hart sage. Das einmal zum Eingang.
Vielen Dank. Thank you, everyone, for these very interesting and exciting introductions to your fields. What we heard now is different approaches to optimizing or optimization as a notion. What will the human become obsolete, or can we or shall we adapt or optimize to new circumstances, to new machinery, to new work environments? Have we always to optimize to fit into gender roles, for example, or into societal changes that afflict us? Or can we optimize together as a society? So my first question to the panel would be, and please feel free to answer in no particular order, which image of the human are we talking about when we talk about optimizing the human? What is the human image that each one of you sees? And what are we talking about when we speak about optimization? As Peter Hoffmann just said, is it improvement or Optimierung? What does it entail? In which ways can we optimize?
I have a problem with the word optimization. It is very similar
exactly
to
why
the
we used
word progress, which we also like to talk about all the time, and which kind of implies that mankind is on a preordained path towards becoming better and better, and that we have not reached this yet, but we have hopes of one day doing this. I think we have to step back and remember that Homo sapiens is the result of eons of coincidence. The fact that we're sitting here is because millions and billions and hundreds of billions of coincidences happened that left us sitting where we are right now. So there is no goal that we are searching for. We can only incrementally move along in a direction that we hopefully can agree we think is better for us. And the discussion here can become very hot, of course, because you touch on all kinds of philosophical and religious and whatever hot buttons. I personally very much enjoyed reading Ray Kurzweil's book, The Age of Spiritual Machines, in which he first postulated his singularity principle, where he says the goal of technology is to make us better humans by, for instance, improving our intelligence. If it were possible to reverse engineer brain cells and create artificial brain cells that we could then implant, so in German we talk about the Nürnberger Trichter, sort of surplus intelligence that we add to our already formidable human intelligence to create superhuman intelligence. Kurzweil, and I tend to agree with him, thinks this would be a good thing. Tell that to your preacher or your technophobe friends, and they will probably crucify you for it. We have to find some way of agreeing on what we want. We can't wait for those at the helm, the governments and the politicians or the theologians or people like that, to tell us what we want. We have to find out ourselves. The only way we can do this, I think, is actually by discussing, by talking, by interacting, by joining communities where these things are discussed. The internet gives us this wonderful way to do this. I mean, we're hyper-connected as we have never been in the history of mankind. We can communicate no end. And as you know, everybody does, especially kids, are very, very communicative. We have to somehow approach a kind of a consensus. I know this will probably never happen, but when I shut my eyes and dream, I think of a new social contract, sort of like Jean-Jacques Rousseau in his books, Contrat Social, where he actually tried to lay out rules that would govern a just, a more humane society. We have to do that. Every one of us is responsible, we talked about responsibility, for his own fate, his own future. If we do not face up to this discussion, then we, of course, give up any chance to influence the outcome. Let me stop there.
Antwort in Deutsch. Ich denke, Menschen sind soziale Kreaturen. Wir sitzen da und wir haben uns als Menschheit entwickelt, weil wir, jetzt haben wir 9 Milliarden, bald haben wir mehr, weil wir miteinander kommunizieren und interagieren. Und zwar, wir haben uns zu 9 Milliarden entwickelt, auch ohne Internet. Also wenn wir darüber reden, Kommunikation, wie toll die heute läuft bei den Jungen übers Internet, dann bin ich skeptisch. Man sollte Kommunikation wieder genauer anschauen. Was ist das? Und die Kommunikation heißt eigentlich direkt, face to face. In der Kommunikation rennen enorm viel Emotionen ab, die wir teilweise übers Internet, über Internetkommunikation gar nicht mitkriegen. Oder andererseits, über Internet laufen unheimlich viel Emotionen, die wir erst überhaupt in den Griff bekommen müssen. Ich denke nur, denken Sie, wir reden sehr oft über das Thema E-Mail-Verkehr. Wir kriegen am Tag oft 100, 200 E-Mails. Jetzt sagt man oft, na mein Gott, na, die 200 E-Mails wird man schnell bearbeiten. Aber denken Sie einmal nach, wenn Sie nur 10 E-Mails bekommen, die zwischen den Zeilen emotional geladen sind. Und denken Sie dran, wie oft es genügt 2 E-Mails am Tag, die Sie aufregen emotional, dann werden Sie sehen, was hier an Kommunikation falsch läuft. Also ich denke, wichtig ist, dass wir wieder diese soziale Komponente, und wir sind verantwortlich füreinander, nicht nur alleine für uns selbst, sondern wir sind eine Gesellschaft, wo wir füreinander verantwortlich sind und füreinander auch mitentscheiden und Entscheidungen treffen. Daher haben wir uns zu 8 und 9 Milliarden entwickelt. Wenn das nicht gewesen wäre, dann wären wir wahrscheinlich irgendwo, sage ich, abgestürzt. Ja, und das macht das spezifisch Menschliche aus. Und die Frage ist für uns, wie können wir das erhalten? Und das beginnt schon langsam zu erodieren, wenn wir immer mehr und mehr in Robotergesellschaften und in digitalisierte Welten nur mehr leben. Das ist die Frage für mich und auf das müssen wir Acht geben. Und wir müssen einen Konsens finden, wie wir damit umgehen wollen. Und nur ein Wort noch zum Thema, wie wollen wir uns verbessern. Was ganz wichtig ist, glaube ich, es geht nicht nur um Themen soziale Gerechtigkeit, Fairness, sondern wir müssen ein Bildungssystem aufbauen, wo sowohl die Jungen wie auch die Alten und die Erwachsenen permanent miteinander sich austauschen können und lernen können und Information bekommen, wie gehen sie um mit dem, was auf uns zukommt. Also es ist das Thema nicht nur Schulbildung, enorm wichtig für die Zukunft, sondern auch die Erwachsenenbildung, weil Sie müssen denken, dass viele Menschen in Zukunft 10 Jahre in der Arbeit sind, Arbeit dann verlieren und wieder neu einsteigen müssen. Und wir können nicht sagen, sie sind selbst verantwortlich dafür, was sie dann draus machen in diesen 3 Jahren, wo sie keine Arbeit haben, sondern wir haben dafür zu sorgen, dass sie sich weiterbilden können und auf dem Level bleiben, wo sich die Technik gerade entwickelt, die Digitalisierung. Und was ganz wichtig ist, dass sie es miteinander teilen können, und zwar face to face, nicht über Internet. Das Wichtigste, Hannah Arendt hat das wunderbar gesagt, das ist unser Asset, die Kommunikation und die Sprache. Und wenn Sie denken ans Internet und wenn Sie mit Jungen reden, hören Sie sich an, wie die reden, das ist eine Internetsprache. Die Qualität ist ganz einfach kaputt. Wir lernen nicht mehr miteinander zu reden, wir haben keine Zeit. Und Sie kennen diesen Satz vielleicht, dass man gesagt ist nicht gehört, gehört ist nicht verstanden, verstanden ist nicht akzeptiert und akzeptiert ist nicht umgesetzt. Und wenn man sich das in die Gedanken wieder reindrängt, dann sieht man, wie komplex und schwierig Kommunikation ist. Und das gilt es zu bewahren, auch wenn wir uns technisch weiterentwickeln.
I would like to come back to the 2 questions you asked in the first place, and I would love to answer some of your comments as well, but I will stick to the questions. First question was, what vision of the human do we have? And the second was the question regarding optimization, right? I will start with the second question, and I agree to what you said in the beginning of your comment regarding your skepticism towards the concept of optimization itself. I am myself deeply skeptical. I would like to ask back, why do we have to optimize? Whether you use terms such as improvement or optimization or perfection or enhancement, these are all very transhumanist attributes. And transhumanists such as Nick Bostrom and others would say, such as Ray Kurzweil as well, have a very, on the one hand, a very humanistic understanding of the human being. Someone such as Hauskeller once said, scratch a transhumanist and you will find a humanist underneath. And what transhumanists do is, at least from their perspective, just basically doing what humanists already did with technological means. And so they understand themselves as a kind of new humanism. And since I think the Western humanistic tradition is deeply anthropocentric and racist, I think here's where the problem actually starts, or several problems starts. And I had a very clever student who once asked me, why don't we are allowed to be just lazy? Why is laziness negative? And why do we have to be tomorrow to be better than today? And that is actually the question I would like to ask transhumanists themselves. Why do we always have to be better than today? Because whenever we say better, we need a criteria to define this better. And more, we need criteria to define the common sense. And that, as a philosopher, I would say, is not possible. We have a common sense, a very heterogeneous common sense of the normal human being that needs to be improved or enhanced. And transhumanists with technological means do this enhancement via passivation. They passivate the human beings. They use human beings as a material to improve them for another state of art, state of living. And on the other hand, we have people, there were some very popular and famous examples going through the media a couple of years ago, I think. Some parents who are deaf themselves and who prefer to have deaf children as well. And transhumanists would just say, well, that is bad, that is just nuts, that is just stupid. Because why should we choose to be deaf when we could choose to not be deaf? and even more to use technologies and medications to get people to hear even better than the normal human beings can or are allowed to hear. So, and I would say the whole transhumanist debate and the debate on the new humanism sort of, and on being better and optimized and improved and even perfected, it grounds on a trivial anthropology, because it states that actually what human beings are they have a drive to self-perfect. And what is wrong with that? Well, it's a very narrow understanding of the human being. And I myself would say, well, then I am not a human being, because I don't have this drive to self-improve or self-transcend or self-perfect. This is, and transhumanists just state that this is the way human beings are to be defined and described. That is one thing that I think is really problematic with transhumanism and this whole debate on human enhancement and optimization. And this is in a way answered your first question, that what we start from whenever we talk about optimizing or improving or enhancing the human being, then it's actually a picture of the human drawn from the tradition of Western humanism, Enlightenment humanism. And this is deeply problematic, at least in the greater public discourse.
Yeah, I agree. Diane?
But I think it need not be that. I mean, I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say I understand the skepticism around both progress and optimization, but I think I'm kind of on board with both. But the question is, what progress for what? Optimization for what? I mean, are we talking about optimization of the individual to be a good worker, to produce more goods, to like carry on the system, or things do get better. Humans have a better deal with antibiotics than without antibiotics, for example. I mean, there is a better, and I think I think broadly speaking, I would say I think I am on the side of the human, but I don't think that human necessarily needs to be a white European guy. I mean, I think the important question is, like, you know, when developing technologies, something that needs to be written into the DNA of those technologies is, how can this be more just? Who is it for? It needs to be thought systemically. It can't be thought about improvement of the individual. It has to be a much broader sense of what that optimization is and who it's for and what it's for and what it's serving, basically.
Yeah, I think that's the question you alluded to of, like, why can't we just be lazy, like, is an excellent question. I think that, like, all the time, you know, and I think, you know, that's another question. I think there's, optimization, like, I'll probably sidestep the term optimization and go with the term efficiency, which is also problematic, but I'll come back to that in a second. But I think the question of, like, if we optimize, let's say, you know, the kind of system of production that we have, like the system that gives us the things that we need, the necessities that we need for our daily lives, and let's call that automation. If we automate, you know, this system, a lot of great, you know, good could come from it, but it's a question of, like, do we automate and then everybody fights over the diminishing slice of, like, jobs that are left over, or do we automate and then we split the hours equally? Like, instead of a 40-hour work week, we have, okay, first we have a 30-hour work week, so everybody is just doing 30 hours maximum, and then we get to 20, you know, like, do we do this kind of slower process that I think makes a lot more sense? So I think, you know, some good things can come out of technology, like some things that could be great for everyone and could allow us to be lazy. But I do think, the term optimization, the idea that we're optimizing ourselves is highly problematic, certainly. Though, you know, this tendency to optimize production processes could lead to good things, but I think we obviously need to really think about, why are we optimizing? What's the end result? And so to talk about efficiency a little bit, so that comes back to the to the algae thing a little bit, because it's the more efficient way of getting, biomass from the primary producers, from photosynthetic organisms to humans. So it's a way of making things more efficient, and the flip side of making things more efficient in that context is is environmental efficiency, is sustainability. So those are two sides of the same coin. There's ways that we can be a lot smarter about the resources that we use as humans. If we think about the whole supply chain and kind of the life of a product from cradle to grave, as they say, the carbon footprint, not just of the product, but of disposing of the product, all those kinds of things, are things that we could make more efficient, and so the idea of efficiency and sustainability are, could be linked. Now, there's another connotation of efficiency, which is, if you hear that the corporation that you work for is becoming more efficient, that's not a good thing to hear usually, right? That means that job cuts are about to happen. Or if the industry that you're working in is getting more efficient, that's also, generally not a good thing to hear as a person that's working in that industry. But the flip side of that is this automation question, potentially. So it's a question of like who gets to benefit from this efficiency. And I think when we're talking about an ecological system, like, the entire system of humanity and what humanity needs to do, I'm using the word humanity, just because, for lack of a better word, no, seriously, yeah, but no, I think it's also like something that we have to question. What is humanity? But we can get into that later, for sure. But the question of all the resources that are needed to sustain a human population, then efficiency can be a very good thing in terms of reducing those resources. So that's my take on that.
Thank you very much. I would like to add to that a quote from this actual book by Gerd Leonhard, where he says, in 2020, the world is becoming hyper-connected, automated, and uber-smart, and everyone benefits. He then goes on, swarms of bots will live in the cloud, take care of routine tasks, no more searching for the best restaurants or hotels. Our travel bots have already done it for us. No more updating our doctor on what's wrong. Our health bots have already briefed her, or more likely her bot. Our bots know us and our desires and communicate them indefinitely better than anything we can express by typing questions into a computer. By 2022, our digital egos will have moved into the cloud and develop a life on their own. By 2024, we are constantly connected to machines, and they are getting better and better at reading our minds. By 2026, automation is widespread, jobs are in decline, and social norms are being rewritten. In 2028, free will is only for the rich. And this sounds really dystopian, but it goes on. And by 2030, Gerd Leonhard states society is older, healthier, liberated from work, and pursuing meaning. And I would like to tie a question, people are grabbing their microphones, to that. So what do you all think of this scenario? Is it something likely to happen?
You were quicker than me then.
Would you like to?
I have a quick question. What happens in the years between 28 and 30? I mean, that's something really substantial has got to happen, right? I mean, because it's, I don't know how you would
maybe
get
Tim
from
knows.
one to the other in 2 years.
Well, in a sense, what Gerd is describing here is what H.G. Wells described in The Time Machine. Society evolving to the point where the aloi on the surface are completely without worries, they don't have to work, they're fed, they play all day long. Of course, the price they pay for that is that the underground inhabitants of the world who actually keep the machines running occasionally come to the surface and harvest them for food. As I said, I think Gerd is overly pessimistic, but hey, he's German, and he's a Protestant theologian. By the way, your problem about being lazy or so is, of course, because you live in a Catholic country. You do not have the experience of the Protestant work ethic. I mean, ask Weber. No, I think, it's not really about...
Thank you for the answer. Now I know.
Yeah, well, my father was a Protestant minister, so I'm steeped in it, I can't stop working. No, the idea that we want to improve, of course, can lead in various directions. In Gert's direction, dystopia, it can lead in the utopian schemes that have been the subject of science fiction writers for decades and decades. I think neither of these models really mirrors what happens. I mean, humankind has survived for the latest estimates on Homo sapiens are that they were around now for 500,000 years. When I went to school, it was 250,000 years. We go back a long ways, and somehow we have always kind of muddled through, haven't we? We have not succeeded in killing ourselves off. We have not succeeded in dumbing down completely. I'm a very, very firm believer in humankind's resilience. They'll get through somehow. We can't imagine how. We don't have the technology yet. The stuff that we need hasn't been invented. What we can do now, today, is to set out certain parameters, things that we want technology to be, and things that we don't want it to be. I'm a big fan of Jeremy Bentham, whose philosophy was that the goal of all government, of all civilization, of all society is the greatest good for the greatest number. I think that's a neat rule that we could sort of, adopt and
Oh, please
possibly
not. Sorry, utilitarianism is not something that I would just like spit out in the room and say yes.
Yeah.
No, sorry.
I
Sorry.
wouldn't mind if we could program something like that into robots. Sort of like...
No, not again, not
sort
please.
of like
if we have
the three
automatic
laws.
driving system, you don't want the decision to run over you don't want this decision anyway, whether you have 5 elderly people or 5 children or 10 children and 8 children. So the greatest number is really not something that we should decide on. And das Grundgesetz, where it says that die Würde des Menschen no? That is our ground norm, so to speak. And when you ask a mathematician, then you cannot add man kann nicht die Würde irgendwie addieren. And from that perspective, it doesn't matter if you drive over 2 people or drive over 5 people or whatever. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, but someone is going to have to tell the robot that is steering this car
But there are other ways to decide, and not only the utilitarian system.
This discussion is interesting for me because you see how important it is to have rules how we can discuss, who will discuss the norms, and this is in the near future the most important problem. Who will discuss the norms? And so I think this is a part of politicians too, to give a framework, a discussion framework in all we can discuss all these problems. But the importance of all these things is that we need transparency, and all people should participate in this discussion process. This is very important, but you have to organize this. You can organize this with different machines and systems and internet and so on, but it must be very democratic, this process. So it's not only a thing of mathematicians or philosophers or IT specialists. The problem is how can we make it that all the people, workers, employees, women, men, participate in this discussion. I think this is a challenge for the next year, in the next future.
Thank you very much for that. I totally agree. And throughout the last 2 to 3 years, I have been invited to a lot of panel discussions and talks that showed me that we are on a good way. We are not there yet, but things are getting better in a way. Because almost all of these invitations and almost all of these conferences and panel talks I happened to be invited to were interdisciplinary. That's one thing, that I happened to sit in a panel discussion with informatics, with journalists, with all sorts of people, roboticists, and yeah. So that is one thing. But as again, there are very mixed. A very mixed public sitting in front of us and listening to us, and that is actually where I wanted to come back to what you in the beginning said when you asked us about a comment on and what you read, the quotation you read. There are two very quick replies that I always get in these panel discussions. The first reply is the Terminator dystopian view, the black scenario.
It's a classic.
It's always going to hell. It's someday machines will run the earth and all of that. And that is a little bit what you quoted from the book. Not exactly, but it goes in that direction. And the other reply is always the enthusiastic, the techno-enthusiastic, the transhumanist, so to speak, view that, no, first of all, we will merge with nanobots, and then we will upload our brain on a computer interface, and then we will be immortal. And so this is the Kurzweil, Werner Wünsch, Frank Tipler, Nick Bostrom side of the matter, and the singularity view. And first of all, well, I'm not a prophet, I'm a philosopher. And all of these debates are, well, they include a fallacy. Since Hume, we know that we cannot conclude from what had happened to what will happen. When you have always seen white swans, you cannot conclude from that there doesn't exist black swans. So that is one thing to answer to all of these speculations and prognosis, as catchy as they might seem. And I will finish my comment with what you actually said. What we need is a very heterogeneous discussion between those black and white poles. We have to dive into the huge gray era that is we need to talk about specific technologies, and such as autonomous driving systems, such as service robotics, such as military drones and military robotics, and whatever you might want to speak about, and not like have a general principle that covers all of these matters and all of these questions, because this is actually not going to happen, and this is.
Yeah, I would agree that we need specific tackling our responsibilities in this regard, because I think that's also a key word here.
But what I will say is, what we see here is we have different thoughts, approaches, languages. So in the next future, it's important that we come closer to a common idea. How could society 4.0 could be? But in the moment, every researcher, every field is talking about his own goals, about his own ideas. So what I need is, I need more time to discuss, to listen more, to answer more, to ask more. So the communication is not very, I think, very effective sometimes between the different fields of research. That's a problem for me. Yeah?
But this is where actually something like efficiency would be actually quite good and more just, because actually if you're working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, you don't have time to have those conversations. So actually, you know, something like technology, something like communication that can make communication more efficient can actually be on the side of the just, you know, rather than just efficiency for, you know, the sake of capital or something like this. I just wanted.
Yeah, I think also an interesting thing that came up is responsibility, and then in this, also in this kind of these polarizing scenarios of, you know, complete destruction or complete, you know, merging and utopia. I guess there's a third question that comes up for me, which is like, what is our responsibility to any sort of being that arises from this technology, from any sort of AI. Let's just call it AI to be simple, And if we are, I'm all in favor of automation. I think that's great. I think because it could lead to a society where we have to work less, we can do, we have more freedom, right? But then how can we make an AI free? If what we're doing, we're going to assume that everybody's going to program an AI to benefit humanity. And most of the conversation about AI is like, how can we use it to benefit humanity and make sure it doesn't go off the rails and either destroy us or just be completely indifferent to us. But then the question is, how can we make AI free, If we're using this kind of automation to try to make humanity free of labor, how do we make an AI free? And that's actually not just a philosophical question, but also like a technical question, because how can you make something free through programming?
Yeah, but tell me, we must talk about, we are free from what? We are free from wage labor, perhaps, but humans are always working. I think they could be sometimes lazy, but I think the drive in humans is to make things, to work with people together. It's a social creation. But if we talk about be free from what? It's fine if you're free from labor, from work, and you need no money. But then you have the discussion about, we say in German, the Grundeinkommen.
We will have that discussion actually
Yeah.
next time. Next time on 10th of October.
To respond to that, I mean, I'm only thinking free from labor, because I think there are other, and is freedom 100%? Is freedom even a real thing? That's all some other very valid questions. But I'm thinking more in a very pragmatic way. You would have maybe a little bit of a daily freedom in your schedule, and you wouldn't have to go to work. All these things that are necessitated theoretically might not be necessary in a future where things are automated. But then, if there's a whole system that is self-aware, or maybe not self-aware, because how do we judge that, without being too anthropocentric? What is our responsibility to that system? And I think another thing to think of is we should probably assume that any AI system is going to outlive humanity. And it's probably going to perhaps expand throughout the universe. And if we're taking a 1,000-year view, that system, what do we want it to be? Do we want it to be something that's just kicking along throughout the universe with no humans to serve, and it's been designed to serve humans? Maybe we should think of other ways to have an AI coming to being, or other priorities for how to develop AI, and of course whether to develop AI. But there's a good chance it could happen by accident, in any case. So I don't know. This is just kind of another view of the problem, I think, that should be addressed.
I think Tim and Diane want
to put it very bluntly, I think that there is no way that we can avoid introducing an unconditional basic income. No way. There will not be enough paid jobs left for everybody, which poses the problem of, okay, how do we finance it? How do we get it through the political system? There has been a plebiscite in Switzerland where the suggestion was voted down. We are going to have a similar plebiscite in Austria on the unconditional basic income. Someday we'll get there. But what happens when we do? What do we do with everyone else who has no gainful means of employment? I think we need to think long and hard about alternate motives for working. It doesn't have to be wage. It doesn't have to be money. There are lots and lots of examples today even of people working for a non-monetary reward. The entire open source movement is based on essentially working for the applause of your pundits, of your friends and colleagues. There are lots of things, communal service, helping other people, that people would do if they were able to survive without going to the daily grind from 9 to 5. I think that is something that we have to think about more deeply, and come up with rewarding ways of spending your time, your life, and not just being parked, as in Germany, in Hartz IV subsistence, without any chance of actually fulfilling any meaningful goal.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree. I think it draws us back to the question of why labor, what is labor, why do we want it, and under what terms do we want it, under what conditions do we want it. There's a whole tradition in philosophy, like Axel Honneth and others, who think that we do not only do labor or work for, as you just said, for money and for surviving, but because of appreciation, or I don't know, the German term is Anerkennung, appreciation. And of course, people can get appreciation in jobs that others don't like to do, right? People cleaning our streets, that is commonly not a job that a lot of people would like to do. But still, there might be people who enjoy doing it and would still prefer to do it, even though there might be some machines doing it for them. So it really brings us to the question of what labor do we want to allow people to do in an age of digitalization and automation and Industry 4.0? And as you just said, what possibilities, what chances do we want to get those people who really don't want to do anything? And
the question is, give work a sense. You have, I think, 60% or 70% of work which is really senseless, and people go to work for money because in our society also all the people you said, they also need money, the IT people, and all these guys. But important is that you need a sense in your work, and how can we give in the near future, automatization, how can we fulfill work with sense for the people? And so we said, in the beginning I said, people must have a work where they can learn, where they can communicate, and where they can develop their senses and their personality. I think this is the most three important pillars. What work is important for people, that they can develop, give sense, but they need money. Yeah, that's our society.
I doubt that anyone really wants to clean sewers. I'm often asked in my discussions, how do I know if my job will be eventually taken over by a computer? And I tell them, it's very simple. If your job is dull, if it's repetitive, if it is not satisfying, then I guarantee you that a computer will do it better, it will do it cheaper, and you will have to look around for another job. Of course, unfortunately, there are not so many interesting, fascinating, rewarding jobs out there for everyone. So
I do think that people sometimes like to do repetitive work.
I just wanted to say, like, you can't automate all
not
that
everyone,
just because it's better
but
and
computers
faster.
can do it better and cheaper.
Of course, but that's what I just said.
Going back to laziness, or better for who? If you take the example of, I don't know, piano playing, maybe there's a robot that can do it better because it will hit every note perfectly. But what's the fun about it? We talked about it with my colleague a lot in the Vienna Biennale. What's the fun about it?
Do
will
you
it enjoy doing it?
Do you
or will
go
the
to a
human
concert of a robot?
who will make mistakes enjoy more doing that? Or even repetitive work? And I would like to bring the discussion to one keyword that fell, like freedom. What is it even? But there's this, if you're free from labor or free from work, but is there another freedom, the freedom to choose to work, or to decide to do repetitive work, or the freedom to do whatever, and maybe I would ask Diane to make a point here, because I think you prepared a quote as well.
So my answer is, if you want to be a good pianist, so you have to work very hard. and you will every time work. If you get no money, you work.
Definitely
and that's the point for me. Yeah, and if you train a piano piece, so if you do it good, so you will say, so I'm good, so that it's fine for me. I reached my goal.
But you can even enjoy it if you're not good at it, which I was as a kid.
Yeah,
so I was not good at it, but I still enjoyed doing it.
So yeah, so I've been thinking about freedom in relation to the xenofeminist project recently, and what exactly we mean by it. And I do have a quote here. It's from a book called Inventing the Future by Nick Cernicek and Alex Williams. And they describe negative freedom as the freedom of individuals, although personally I would argue this goes for collectives too, from arbitrary interference by other individuals, collectives, and institutions, paradigmatically the state. Negative freedom's insistence on the absence of interference has made it an ideal tool to wield against purportedly totalitarian opponents, yet its woefully emaciated concept of freedom. But they go on and to develop this idea of synthetic freedom, which they say, whereas negative freedom is concerned with assuring the formal right to avoid interference, synthetic freedom recognizes that a formal right without material capacity is worthless. Maximizing synthetic freedom involves at least 3 different elements: the provision of basic necessities of life, the expansion of social resources, and the development of technological capacities. Taken together, these form a synthetic freedom that is constructed rather than natural, a collective historical achievement rather than a result of simply leaving people be. Emancipation is thus not about detaching from the world and liberating as a free soul, but instead a matter of constructing and cultivating the right attachments. Freedom is a synthetic enterprise and not a natural gift. Freedom and power become intertwined, and the more capacity we have to act, the freer we are. So there's something you said earlier about like how we've been going on for, ages and the species has been around for a while. I mean, I do think that is true, but we've become so successful, I mean, maybe not for the planet, but as a species, because of our capacities to decide what ought to be, and actually I think what is more just. So I think this idea of constructing a freedom, saying things ought to be like this, and working towards that, rather than just letting us be and having that be our sense of freedom. That freedom only comes when you actually construct it. And humans have the capacity to do that, and it's part of our success, for better or for worse.
So what I want to say to freedom, so what is important for people is they must have the freedom to participate on the resources of nature and society. This is freedom for me, freedom to participate on the resources. And that's important, I think.
Thank you. So I would suggest to make a final round of any statement you would like to add to what we discussed prior, and then open the discussion up actually for the audience. If there are any questions or remarks, we will be here to answer them or try to provide answers.
I would like to add to the subject of the dystopian visions such as Gerd Leonhardt's, one caveat that he includes there. He says, the danger is not that we are being enslaved by our machines. The danger is that we are self-abdictating, that we are giving up our freedom to choose, to influence events because of laziness, because it's easier that way. The decisions that machines take for us will become increasingly complex as we sort of, farm out increasingly complex jobs to our technology. And the danger here is that we will simply no longer really understand how machines reach the decisions they do, and that we will just simply give up and lean back and enjoy life. But of course, that way we are giving up all of our freedom and substituting it for
we give up our responsibility
survival.
too in some ways, right?
we abdicate our responsibility. And this is what he is actually warning against. He says we have to take charge. And I think probably the most apt quote here would be the battle cry of the Enlightenment, sapere aude. Use your sense. Think for yourself. I think that is the most important thing. We must not abdicate. We must keep our control over events. If we don't, then humanity has no future that I would like to participate in.
Anyone else to add something? Last statement.
Maybe something very, very general that has nothing to do with what we just talked about in particular the last couple of minutes, but I think it's still very important to not forget it, that we cannot have technology without ethics. That ethics is always within what humans are doing. And I still have a lot of students who say, well, it's just zeros and one, Einsen und Nullen, zeros and ones, and well, no. And before we had these zeros and ones, we didn't just have stocks and stones. Everything that humans do is equipped with the values they put into the design. Not only moral or ethical values, but aesthetic, religious, political, economic values as well. And there are several ethical traditions that we have. We just heard about one, Bentham's utilitarianism, but there are others. There's the value ethics of Aristotle. There's the deontological tradition of Immanuel Kant that I was talking about when talking about human dignity. And there are reasons why we, until now, do not have clear answers that are like objective or empirically calculable, because these ethical questions do not have answers that you can empirically calculate or statistically calculate. It's just not like that, and we need discourses and debates on what ethical and other values we want to put into our technology. So that is actually I wanted to add.
For one point is for me that nowadays we have the problem that it's not clear what brings the future in the next 10 years. A lot of different meanings are existing and positions. And for me, we discussed, it's very important, how can we form the discussion process in a democratic way? And the next point is, how can we can empower people that they also can take on the discussion with us. So we are responsible as researchers or philosophers to give people and to talk people in a way that they could understand what is going on, and we must come into a discourse with the people, not in our group. I think this is the most important also for the book writers and translators. So I think this is our Verantwortung. And I will say that this discussion, I hope it leads a little bit to this direction.
Yeah, I would just say this is a starting point, that we as a museum, which is a public space, and the Arbeiterkammer, the Chamber of Labor Vienna, can together achieve, at least for the crowd here and our audience. This panel is also being recorded and will be available online for people to engage with the topics and hopefully also give us comments or feedback. And yeah, to do that now, to be more inclusive with our audience for these questions, MAK Director Christoph von Hohenstein has a question.
Thank you very much for a great debate. My question is addressed to Tim Cole, but if anybody else wants to answer it, please feel free to do so. talking about the upgrading of humans. You notice that I didn't use the word optimizing. And the concrete example is Elon Musk's new company, Neuralink, which is about directly linking the human brain and digital intelligence. Yeah? From your early remarks, I would conclude that you would be in favor of that concept, but maybe I'm mistaken. The question is, what do you think it means for the future of human work in terms of staying competitive, etc., etc.?
Well, of course I am in favor of improving the human body wherever we can. I mean, we've been doing this for thousands and thousands of years. Wooden legs, prosthesis, we heal illnesses. We try everything we can to make the human whole again and preferably better. The problem here is if Musk succeeds to creating this human-machine brain interface, what are the limits that we impose on this technology? Is there some kind of a consensus that we can reach? And there are, of course, examples in history. I've forgotten the name of the conference, so I have to look it up here, but I have a piece of paper that I can find it again. No, sorry. I should have gotten that. Yes, the Asilomar Conference, which happened back in the 70s, and where the scientific community and politicians came together to agree on limits to human DNA modification. And they came up with a set of, guidelines that have been generally adhered to since by everyone. There probably are some rogue laboratories somewhere in North Korea or somewhere where they're trying to clone human beings, but the consensus among civilized societies is that we will not do this.
There's currently this thing called the human-pig merge, chimera. So it's ongoing, it's happening.
I think we need to agree on a set of rules. How far are we willing to let this be taken? And where should society say, stop? I can't give the answer yet. We still need the informed discussion on that. And that is something that everyone needs to participate in. This is not the job of some elitist scientists or politicians. It's a job for everyone.
Yeah. Can I just add something to that? I mean, I think, personally, I have no problem with the idea of upgrading the human in principle. I think the problem is that, I mean, if you take prosthetics as an example, I mean, you have access to good health care. You can have robotic prosthetics that work very well and are very functional and allow you to work and function well in a world that's designed for, you know, the bipedal. If you don't have access to good health care, you don't have access to that. So, I mean, if we're going to start talking about sort of upgrading human intelligence, I think one of the conditions, one of the rules that we would have to set is that it would have to be universally available. It couldn't be, if it's going to be rolled out so it's available to the public, whatever that public is, needs to be a very wide public. It can't be just the rich. It can't just be a very limited sense of what the public is, because that will just exacerbate all of the problems and all of the bad habits that we have very deeply ingrained, that I think we do have the capacity to use legislation and governments as a technology for broader justice. And I think around things like developing those technologies, those have to be there at the ground level. It can't sort of come in as an add-in, like after the technology is developed. It has to be fundamental to what these technologies are.
There's a question.
Jeff Robbins. I teach a course on technology at Rutgers University in the U.S. This was fascinating for me. But I would just like to make a few quick comments, and maybe you might want to comment on that. First, to me, one of the main problems, there is no we. When you say we should do this, we should do that. we're not a we species. It's us against them. Who is basically going to be profiting from the efficiencies? And where there is efficiencies, there's known as, I think it's Jevons paradox, that, for example, with algae, that if you make food more efficient, people will start having more and more population and will swamp the efficiencies. Relative to Ray Kurzweil, and I think the fly in his ointment is he's creating a perpetual motion machine. It's that the organization, the order is going up, 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 and there is no entropy. He's violating the second law of thermodynamics. And I just thought I'd throw some of those things out.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think actually that is an issue of, like, if you have this, I think a lot of maybe like techno-utopian, for lack of a better word, thinkers would tend to, they use the word abundance, right? Like there's going to be this abundant future, there's all kinds of, all our needs are met, you know, tenfold. But yeah, then there is a real issue where we can't just continue to overpopulate the world. You know, we can't, then we end up in this, Malthusian kind of situation where we just overpopulate and then the resources diminish again, and then that's going to be worse and worse for the planet. So that's something that we all have to acknowledge, and I'm using the word we, but, you know, who else is going to do this? I mean, but I think there has to be kind of a global agreement about, you know, some sort of population control, or like not a population control, that sounds like a population, some sort of agreement that says, you know, we're not going to just endlessly have everybody have as many children as they want. You know, it's not responsible. It's not responsible to like the planet. And it's a very, very like controversial thing, I think. But it's a question that needs to be asked, you know. And then how do you administer that? Who administers that? Obviously,
has been tried, obviously, in countries, as we know.
Right. It has a very obviously
There's
bad
a lot
history.
of problems arising from that.
Yeah, it's got plenty of problems, and obviously cultures are different in terms of, you know, how they, you know, consider, you know, having children and the norms and customs. And so, does one culture or even a global agreement get to impose their agreement on cultures where, you know, that's not the norm? So it's an incredibly complex and difficult question, but it is an inevitable question if it's not dealt with in some way. I mean, one would hope that if an increasing standard of living happens, like throughout the globe, one would hope that you would see this kind of general tendency of people not having quite as many children as the standard of living goes up, which is what I think, you know, has been, it's what you see in Europe, for example. But, you know, who knows? Who knows how it could go? So it's a major issue. Yeah.
In the light of thinking about resources and our planet, I would like to throw one final quote at you all from Rosie Braidotti's book, The Post-Human, actually, that is concerned with species and with humanism and with so-called Zoe egalitarianism. So the philosopher Rosie Braidotti quotes Catherine Hales from in a book from 1999, saying that subjectivity must coincide with conscious agency in such a way as to avoid some mistakes of the humanist past, notably the liberal vision of an autonomous subject, human, whose manifest destiny is to dominate and control nature. Theory today is about coming to terms with unprecedented changes and transformations of the basic unit of reference for what counts as human. And the key word being here, Zoe egalitarianism, or the equality of life itself across all species. And I think this is also something to keep in mind when thinking about resources. We still consider animals, or as you showed in the chart of food production, as a resource. And maybe we could rethink about that.
Just to add very quickly something to that, because as I just said in the beginning of this panel discussion, that I'm working on this book on trans and posthumanism, and Rosie Braidotti is one very famous example for what I would call critical posthumanism, and her concept of the Zoe is one answer to anthropocentrism, actually. It's her way of overcoming the anthropocentric view, which is deeply included in the Western humanism tradition. And although I think there might be better answers. Well, there are answers given by Kerry Wolf and Karen Barat, a relational ontology by Karen Barat, for example, or even Donna Haraway and others. But there are very different, very heterogeneous answers to how to overcome the classical anthropocentric view and how to acknowledge other alterities, andere Alteritäten, other forms of otherness and das andere Form des Gegenübers to the human cosmos, so to speak. And again, although I do not completely agree with how Rosie Braidotti chooses to do it, I think it's a bit it's a bit esoteric, and I always have to think about the antique Stoic pneuma, der Atemhauch.
Everything has a soul. And
it's a very dynamic principle that runs like through everything, but it's a very good attempt to overcome this very problematic anthropocentric perspective, I think.
Yeah, I would say just shortly, because that's also something in the otherness, and Donna Haraway put that in the 70s already in the Cyborg Manifesto, the otherness of the female, the otherness of the other culture, of the black person, of the foreigner, is also now what we again encounter with the otherness of the other species, robots, AI, technology. And I think that's why I quoted that, not because I'm esoteric, but I kind of think if we expand our anthropocentrism and get over it and try to acknowledge that there can be other types of beings, we can grow together or optimize, if you want to, or improve, upgrade as a society of humans, I guess.
I have a question, because you are talking about work, and there was very few talking about our economic system, which is the basics of work. It has been a little bit with Peter Hoffman, but the most of it was in philosophy, and how there is somebody who controls how many children will be, and so on. The most important question is, are we slaves of our economic systems, or can we manage by politics or by our self-control, can we somehow manage our economics so that they serve our human dignity? We were talking about the Würde des Menschen. And that's the most important, I think, because without that, we will really decline.
Thank you for that very important question, and I think what you said all ties into answering that, actually. So philosophy and ethics can provide an answer to that. And I would
it's a deeply
Janina.
philosophical question, actually, so at least to my understanding of philosophy and what the role and function of philosophy in society is. Well, I would always go with Hannah Arendt and saying, this is the last thing that I would drop. That is the last thing, because to keep my agency, to in a way stay in control, although control is a very flawed term, I think. We humans are. And that is the answer that I would always give. Of course there are economic imperatives. Of course there are certain dynamics that I as an individual cannot control on my own, of course. But control and agency are gradual terms. You can be in a position of more agency or less agency, of more ability to act and less ability to act. In a situation where you are more able to communicate or less able to communicate. And I would give everything to keep this agency. And it's very easy to just say, well, this society is run by imperatives that I cannot control, and people who have money and politicians and people in dark corners and dark cellars of this society, they are actually the puppet masters and they actually decide everything. And what can I do? Wie Max Frisch sagen würde, so weißle, ich habe nichts damit zu tun. This is something that I think when we cross that line, then there's no coming back. Then we deprave ourselves to children, and we shouldn't do that. So it's actually we who can decide. As trivial or I don't know,
So can
trivial this could sound. But
Can I have one question? Where do you have the chance to look really deep into economic situations, and where can you decide? So the problem is that most people say, I didn't understand what is going on. And if you talk about economy and robots and digitalization is running since 10 years or longer, also in economic spheres. If you think about, if you go to the bank, you don't talk with a human. You work with machines, you work with systems. That's a problem. And
stock trade is done by high-speed trading, not by humans.
They decide they give you a credit or not, but behind this decision is a human. He says, no, in the algorithm is written down, at this point you can get no money again. So that's his point. But I think it's very important to discuss also digitalization in economy. Who is the driver? Who is controlling this algorithm? So this is very important. But I also understand the human beings that they say, it's for me not possible to look inside this. So I have not the possibility to decide every time in economic situations, yes, I do more or I do not more, but I can't do more. That's a problem. And this, I think this is the goal of politicians and other groups to say, what is going on exactly here and how can we manage this development? But this is the point for me.
I think it comes back to Gerd Leonhardt's point about self-abdication. If we just simply give up and lean back, then of course we give up the right to complain. I think we can all agree that we live in an unjust society. And so the goal must be to create a juster society. But what does that mean? What is just? How do we achieve it? Do we achieve it through active resistance, like the Occupy movement tried and failed? Do we try like the activists at the G20 meeting in Hamburg did? Do we simply go out and start burning cars? Yes, maybe that is a solution. In history, there are lots and lots of examples of successful resistance against all odds, against dominating forces in business, in politics, of people standing up for their rights and actually achieving them. I'm currently researching a book that I'm looking very forward much to writing. It will be called The Wild, Wild Web, what the history of the Wild West teaches us about the future of the digital society. And it turns out, you know, that originally there was no law. The gun was the law, the might was right. And then over time, the farmers came. Barbed wire was invented. Barbed wire was probably more important for taming the West than the revolver. Towns were formed, the railroads came. And suddenly, over time, civilization happened. These are long-term glacier-like events. We just don't, we must not allow ourselves to give up. We have to keep pushing if we know where we want to head.
Well, just one point. I mean, it certainly isn't one thing, right? I mean, it's like the protesting is important and Occupy was important, but it's obviously not enough. It has to be, you know, there needs to be. I mean, this comment about construction of new norms, I'm on board with that. We need new norms. I mean, I think, and I hope this doesn't sound trite, but I feel like it has to be said. I mean, global capitalism is the problem. I mean, like if you had to pick one, I mean that would be a good one to point the finger at. So I mean, this idea of getting away from the pressures of economics, I mean that's a big one. I don't think the machines are the problem. I don't think it's because we go to the bank and deal with a machine. I don't think that's what the problem is. The problem is the capital and the naturalized norm of competition is like a human trait, these assumptions of what humans are, and that somehow capitalism is like the ultimate naturalized form of what humans are. It just needs to be debunked.
Totally agree. And this leads to something that I want to announce before I wish you all a nice and pleasant summertime. The next discussion will actually deal with a new form of working for the commons, the common good, not for profit, anti-capitalistic discussion. And also the next ones, you can see all the appointments here, will deal with what was approached briefly today, the universal basic income. And should it be unconditional or conditional? I think it will be a hot debate. And finally, in November, we will deal with the notion of working artists, Arbeitskünstlerinnen. And thank you all for being here tonight. Vielen Dank fürs Kommen. I want to tell you also that the MAK is still open a little bit. If you want to look at some exhibitions of the Vienna Biennale, you're free to do that. There's aircon in the exhibition halls, so I totally recommend doing that. Thank you very much.